Consistency is not a behavior a man performs. It is not a tactic, a rule set, or a discipline strategy. It is the external expression of an internal structure. When that structure is stable, consistency emerges naturally. When it is not, no amount of effort can simulate it for long. This is where most men fail. They attempt to behave consistently while remaining emotionally reactive inside. Under low pressure, this illusion holds. Under real pressure, it collapses. Effort always appears as a response to uncertainty. The moment a man senses distance, hesitation, or emotional cooling, effort increases. He talks more. He explains more. He reassures more. He becomes more attentive, more available, more accommodating. Internally, this feels like engagement and care. Structurally, it signals dependency. Emotional systems immediately register that his behavior is being shaped by external feedback rather than internal orientation. Attraction weakens not because the man is doing something wrong, but because his center has shifted outward. This is the core distinction. Effort is reactive. Consistency is self-referenced. Reactive behavior adjusts to emotional signals in the environment. Self-referenced behavior remains aligned regardless of those signals. Attraction responds to self-reference because it communicates stability. When a woman senses that a man's behavior changes based on her mood, approval, or distance, she experiences him as externally regulated. This does not feel safe over time, even if the man is kind, attentive, and well-intentioned. Many men equate effort with care. They believe that doing more proves investment. What they fail to see is that care without internal stability creates pressure. Effort almost always contains an unspoken expectation that the effort will restore closeness, certainty, or reassurance. Even when nothing is said aloud, this expectation is felt. Emotional systems are extremely sensitive to conditional behavior. When actions are outcome-dependent, they feel transactional. Consistency, by contrast, carries no demand. It exists independent of response. This independence is what restores polarity. Consistency does not mean emotional suppression. A consistent man still experiences emotion fully. The difference is that emotion does not dictate his direction. He can feel desire without chasing it. He can feel concern without fixing. He can feel frustration without escalating. Effort-driven men are controlled by emotion even when they appear calm. Their calmness is maintained through overmanagement or suppression. Over time, this creates internal strain and eventual collapse. One of the most damaging effects of effort is behavioral inflation. When reassurance stops working at one level, the man increases output. He gives more attention, more explanation, more emotional labor to achieve the same result. This escalation trains the emotional system to require intensity in order to feel anything. Attraction dulls. What once felt meaningful becomes baseline. Consistency prevents inflation because it does not escalate in response to fear. It allows emotional systems to regulate naturally. Consistency also creates predictability of orientation, not predictability of behavior. Predictable behavior is boring. Predictable orientation is grounding. A woman does not need to know exactly what a man will say or do in every situation. She needs to know who he is when circumstances shift. When orientation is stable, behavior can vary without destabilizing attraction. When orientation is unstable, even perfect behavior feels uncertain. Effort-driven men often fear that if they stop trying, the relationship will fall apart. This belief exposes a deeper issue. They believe the relationship exists because of management. Consistency removes management and replaces it with truth. It asks a difficult question. Does this connection exist when the man is simply himself? This question is uncomfortable because it removes control, but it is the only question that produces real clarity. Consistency reduces emotional noise. When behavior stops oscillating between pursuit and withdrawal, emotional systems relax. Testing decreases. Provocation decreases. Drama decreases. Not because emotion disappears, but because it no longer needs to search for stability. Many emotional tests are not manipulative. They are diagnostic. When orientation is obvious, testing loses purpose. Another critical aspect of consistency is temporal integrity. Effort operates in the present moment. It reacts to what is happening now. Consistency integrates past, present, and future. The man's behavior today aligns with who he was yesterday and who he intends to be tomorrow. This continuity builds trust. Trust is not built through intensity or confession. It is built through reliability of self over time. Effort often masquerades as growth. Men believe they are improving because they are doing more. But growth driven by fear is compensation, not evolution. Consistency allows real growth because it does not abandon the core self in pursuit of outcome. Changes are integrated rather than reactive. The man evolves without losing orientation. Attraction cannot stabilize in a system that requires constant effort to maintain equilibrium. Stability comes from internal alignment, not external correction. When a man becomes consistent, attraction no longer needs to be chased. It responds to the absence of chase because chase signals lack of center. A consistent man is compelling not because of what he does, but because of what does not move him. His reactions are proportionate. His presence is steady. His boundaries remain intact under pressure. This communicates maturity at a level explanation cannot reach. Stable attraction emerges when behavior no longer shifts in response to emotional noise. What undermines most relationships is not conflict, distance, or misunderstanding, but the constant recalibration of self in reaction to them. When a man alters tone, posture, availability, or intent each time the emotional climate changes, the interaction loses its reference point. Without a reference point, emotion expands unchecked. A grounded dynamic forms when reactions stop leading behavior. Emotional signals are registered, but they are not allowed to dictate movement. Silence is not treated as a problem to solve. Distance is not framed as a threat. Neutral moments are not filled to restore comfort. This restraint does not suppress emotion. It prevents inflation. Events retain their actual weight instead of being magnified by anxiety. Another consequence of stability is perceptual accuracy. When internal orientation remains fixed, interpretation gives way to observation. The man stops guessing what things mean and starts seeing what they are. This shift eliminates many unnecessary responses that would otherwise distort interaction. Observation reduces urgency. Reduced urgency restores calm. Behavior anchored in orientation also changes how influence operates. Instead of attempting to shape response through action, the man becomes a point others orient around. Influence shifts from persuasion to presence. Presence requires no explanation. It does not negotiate. It simply exists and allows others to adjust naturally. Emotional endurance grows under this model. Discomfort is no longer treated as a cue for immediate intervention. Feelings are allowed to complete their cycle. When cycles are completed, intensity drops on its own. Interference prolongs emotional charge. Allowance dissolves it. This is why restraint often resolves what effort escalates. Responsibility also returns to its proper place. Rather than managing the emotional field, each person carries their own experience. Interaction becomes mutual instead of regulated. Pressure disappears because no one is attempting to stabilize the other. Over time, trust forms through exposure rather than explanation. Predictable alignment replaces verbal reassurance. The nervous system stops scanning for volatility because repeated evidence of stability accumulates. Attraction responds to this accumulation because it signals reliability. Finally, this approach preserves integrity regardless of outcome. If attraction deepens, it does so without dependency. If it fades, separation occurs without emotional damage. No self-abandonment is required to preserve connection. Coherence remains intact. That coherence, not effort, intensity, or persuasion, is what allows attraction to exist without being maintained. Emotional stability is often described using the wrong reference point. Many discussions frame it as the ability to remain unaffected, unresponsive, or internally closed. This framing leads to a fundamental confusion. It treats emotional neutrality as evidence of strength. In reality, neutrality achieved through disengagement is not stability at all. It is avoidance with a calm surface. Stability is not defined by the absence of emotional movement, but by the presence of internal order while movement occurs. Distance reduces exposure. Stability increases tolerance. This distinction matters because relationships are not destabilized by emotion itself. They are destabilized by a lack of capacity to hold emotion without fragmentation. A man who retreats emotionally may appear composed, but composure achieved through withdrawal creates a vacuum. That vacuum removes information, feedback, and responsiveness. Over time, the relationship loses its ability to self-correct because signals are no longer exchanged accurately. True emotional stability allows engagement without absorption. The man remains available without becoming reactive. He does not harden himself to avoid disturbance, nor does he dissolve into the emotional field. This balanced position communicates internal hierarchy. Emotion exists, but it does not govern. Emotional systems respond to hierarchy because it signals predictability. Predictability is the foundation of trust. Another misunderstanding arises from equating stability with control. Control implies suppression, management, or containment through force. Stability implies integration. Integrated systems do not need constant monitoring. They regulate themselves. A man who is emotionally stable does not track every internal fluctuation. He notices, allows, and responds proportionately. Proportion is the clearest indicator of stability. Disproportion reveals unresolved tension. Emotional distance, by contrast, disrupts proportion. When engagement is reduced, small issues can grow unnoticed until they rupture. The absence of response does not neutralize tension. It delays its expression. When delayed tension eventually surfaces, it does so with greater intensity because it has accumulated without modulation. Stability prevents accumulation by allowing emotion to move in real time. Stability also preserves relational continuity. When a man remains present during emotional fluctuation, continuity is maintained even during disagreement. Distance breaks continuity. Each withdrawal creates a micro-rupture. Over time, these ruptures erode emotional safety. Safety is not created by silence. It is created by reliable presence. Importantly, emotional stability does not require constant verbalization. Presence is not synonymous with explanation. A stable man does not narrate his internal process to prove engagement. He signals engagement through availability, timing, and responsiveness. These signals are often more informative than words because they are harder to manipulate. From a psychological perspective, emotional stability reflects differentiation. Differentiated individuals can maintain a sense of self while remaining connected. Distance collapses connection. Enmeshment collapses self. Stability preserves both simultaneously. This dual preservation is rare because it requires tolerance for internal tension without escape routes. Stability also reshapes how uncertainty is handled. Distance treats uncertainty as danger. Stability treats uncertainty as information. When uncertainty is allowed to exist without immediate resolution, patterns become visible. Premature resolution often hides pattern formation. This is why many relational mistakes repeat themselves. They were resolved too quickly to be understood. Attraction responds strongly to emotional stability because it signals durability. Durability does not mean permanence. It means resistance to fragmentation. A man who can remain whole under emotional load communicates that connection does not threaten identity. This removes pressure from the relationship. When pressure decreases, attraction has room to deepen. Emotional stability also determines how conflict transforms rather than escalates. In unstable dynamics, conflict triggers either confrontation or withdrawal. Both reactions are attempts to regain equilibrium through force or absence. Stability introduces a third option: containment. Containment allows disagreement to exist without polarizing the system. The man does not rush to dominate the exchange, nor does he abandon it. He remains anchored while allowing divergence. This anchoring changes how meaning is assigned to emotional expression. Raised intensity is no longer interpreted as threat. Silence is no longer interpreted as punishment. Emotional signals are processed as signals, not verdicts. This shift reduces defensive interpretation, which is the primary fuel of escalation. Stability also refines vulnerability. Vulnerability expressed without stability transfers emotional load. Vulnerability expressed with stability shares experience without burden. The difference lies in self-support. A stable individual can reveal internal states without requiring external regulation. This form of openness deepens connection rather than straining it. Another critical effect of stability is temporal coherence. Stable individuals do not reset emotionally after each interaction. Their orientation persists across time. This persistence allows emotional memory to form reliably. Emotional memory built on consistency creates security. Memory built on fluctuation creates anxiety. Anxiety is not resolved through reassurance. It is resolved through repeated exposure to coherence. Stability further influences how desire evolves. Desire anchored in distance oscillates between longing and avoidance. Desire anchored in stability matures into attraction that does not require constant stimulation. This form of attraction is quieter but more resilient. It survives routine, stress, and disagreement because it is not dependent on emotional spikes. From a systemic perspective, emotional stability reduces entropy. Entropy in relationships manifests as confusion, misinterpretation, and chronic tension. Stability reduces entropy by providing a consistent frame. Within that frame, variation can occur without disorder. Disorder arises when variation exists without frame. Stability also protects against emotional exhaustion. Distance conserves energy temporarily, but increases long-term strain because unresolved material accumulates. Stability expends energy gradually by processing experience in real time. Gradual expenditure prevents overload. This is why emotionally stable relationships feel sustainable rather than draining. Crucially, stability preserves self-respect. A man who relies on distance often sacrifices authenticity to avoid discomfort. A man who relies on stability remains authentic while tolerating discomfort. This preservation of self is sensed intuitively by others. Attraction aligns with self-respect because it signals integrity. In advanced relational dynamics, emotional stability becomes the environment rather than a behavior. It shapes interaction without effort. Others adjust naturally because the system provides clear boundaries without enforcement. This environment supports both closeness and autonomy simultaneously. Ultimately, emotional stability is not a withdrawal from feeling. It is a commitment to remain structurally intact while feeling unfolds. Distance avoids feeling by leaving the field. Stability stays in the field without losing form. Relationships that endure do so not because emotion disappears, but because it is held within a structure that can carry it. This is why emotional stability should never be confused with emotional distance. One diminishes engagement to survive. The other expands capacity to remain present. Attraction, trust, and longevity emerge from the latter because it reflects a system that can sustain connection without collapse.